And first thing will be, wait a minute.
Oh, we got lucky.
Hold on a minute.
Yay, under the wire. We've been sitting around telling jokes, trying to
Yes, really.
buy time.
My phone went out
Okay.
in a week.
So we have called the meeting to order, and we're about to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And we're going to do that. Everything's over there.
There you go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Now the agenda, which is, we're going to have to change somewhat. And first thing, actually, before we even get into the agenda, we have no secretary. Julie resigned, which we'll get into after we get going here. But anyways, I need somebody to volunteer to be the secretary. So.
I will take notes.
Okay, so we're taking care of that. So as far as the agenda goes, under new business, we're going to need to select a new secretary. And so we need to add that. And other than that, that would be the major change. So I will entertain a motion to
Augment the new business.
What?
I make a motion to augment the new business.
Well, yeah, basically you can just
Whatever.
the agenda with the new recommendation.
Okay, I approve the agenda. I move we approve the agenda as
Amended.
amended, exactly.
Okay.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Minutes. I don't think I saw the minutes. The minutes came very late, and there was not the voter sheet. There are references to the vote sheets on both issues that we voted on last meeting, but they're not included with the minutes. So I would entertain a motion to table the minutes.
I so moved.
Second.
Okay, made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Good. We're done with that. Okay, we have no public hearings. We'll move into old business, which is, I hope everyone's aware of the fact that basically just, we're taking this opportunity to go over the rules and procedures because we don't have any other business, so we'll take advantage of that and see where we can get on making the necessary changes to the rules of procedure. And I think basically let's give ourselves an hour and see how far we get. We may get the whole thing done, who knows? So just,
I don't have a copy.
does anybody have a copy with them?
I do.
I mean, there's a copy online. And, it's right up there on the,
All right, well,
or on that one there.
that's,
I think
okay, I can read this one. That's fine.
So basically, we're, start out and go through the various articles and see what changes may need to be made or what changes we wish to make. And objectives are pretty nondescript. I mean, they're referring to the local code and the state code and
Speak it more, enunciate.
enunciate. Yes.
Basically, Article 1, I can't see any reason to not adopt that as written.
Well, basically, I don't think we, at this point, we're looking actually at, we shouldn't adopt anything at this
Well,
point.
but we should just accept
make-
it as written as a fine.
Yes, make the
It's
change,
okay.
make changes we may wish to make, then we'll put it together as a new document, and then we would vote on that
Okay.
at our next meeting if we got through it tonight, because that's the way the rules say we have to do it anyways. And also, anything we do with this, I would like to have us do it and then give it to our attorney and have him look at it and see what his, his comments are or whatever, and then we'll move forward to adopt it. So, I put something on mine and now I can't remember, because it was a long time ago that I put this on here. It had something to do with board members under objectives, and I have no idea what it was. So, we're not gonna worry about that. So, officers, chair is, I think that's pretty much boilerplate, and vice chair, boilerplate. Secretary, what we have done the last two years actually is we combined the secretary and the Freedom of Information Act office, because basically anything that comes up under Freedom of Information Act gets referred to the secretary anyways, so it's easier to just let that position cover both of those. So if we take 2.3 and 2.4 and just combine them into a single category, if everybody thinks that's appropriate. I'm not hearing any comments, so I'm assuming, I'm assuming that we'll combine them. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, terms of office, that's boilerplate. Vacancies in office, and the vacancies in office refer to the elected positions by the board. And that's boilerplate, and we'll deal with one of those later. And the absence of the chair and vice chair, there we go, nothing there. Meetings. Now, the annual meeting, as it's listed presently, is the meeting in December of each year shall be the annual meeting. And the problem we've had with that is that, wait a minute, let me read this one here again.
Well, the problem we had was, whether or not,
I'm thinking that
For some reason
I'm
why.
thinking in the code, that was where the problem is that the county code says that our annual meeting is in January.
And there was some
And that was the
reason- problem
problem that we were having, is that particularly with the planning commission position, we couldn't make the decision in January because the Board of Supervisors makes their decision in January. We meet after that. So we need to do something in that area to rectify it. And then I think December, I think we should have our annual meeting in December, so that at the annual meeting for the Board of Supervisors, they have the necessary recommendation from our board for the planning commission
Right.
position. And also, it makes it, to me, it makes it a little easier in that it's the understanding that the positions are basically voted on in December, but you don't take the position until January. So it gives you a month to transition, and because at times it can be a little disconcerting to say the chairman who immediately becomes the chairman and had not any intention of running the meeting, and so he's kind of flying by the seat of his pants. So, but that is going to, actually we can leave this the way it is, but we're going to have to get the county then to make a change in the ordinance. Larry, that's,
You can ask.
what?
You can ask.
Well, yes, I mean, that's what I
Say
said,
no,
we need
but-
to, and in the process, I mean, they're in the process of going through
Or you
ordinance
could,
changes right now.
or
so-
you could keep it this way and just make a nomination for the planning commission seat in December.
That, well, but it would not be the annual meeting then.
Doesn't have to be the annual meeting.
Well, no, but what I was just saying though is that to have the annual meeting and make there's nothing that says that at your annual meeting that the elected officers immediately take the position that I know of. I could be wrong on that. But to know at the next meeting, the hierarchy changes, and like I said, it makes it much easier on particularly the chairman to be able to transition in. And we're basically, we're the only board that runs into that because of the nomination or the nomination for the planning commission. And the other thing on that is that, you make, if you do the planning commission in December, and then say you, in January, then suddenly the piece, your nominee to the planning commission ends up getting elected chairman, and that can put an undue burden, because, being the chairman requires a lot of time or whatever. If you got also the planning commission, it gets messy, so, or it could get messy.
Do you have a motion?
Well, like I said, at this point in time, we're going on consensus, I think. Because like I said, we can't really make, we're not at the point of voting changes, I don't think, and the consensus is going to be. Okay, we'll take a public comment on this.
May I? In your rules and regs, it says the annual meeting is December. In the county zoning code, it says the first meeting in January,
Correct.
but it doesn't call it annual. So I think you're safe.
Well,
Say, at the first meeting in January of each year, can set the time, date, etc. Well, you're already doing that in December, but you're all agreeing on it. And I think it's better to set it in December so everyone knows to go into January, right? But
in that case, I think so.
but there's no voting as far as the membership on that.
Well, I would think to reword that then in the code, county code, so it makes more sense in that, the annual meeting is for the planning, or for the BZA is in December, and they assign all its positions and the discussion.
I think you're
And it
good.
just-
I think you're good for both.
Okay, so we're,
Okay.
Well, I mean, as you know, your nomination to the Board of Supervisors on who they should appoint to be your representative on the Planning Commission is a nomination and a recommendation, and not necessarily going to be followed. So you can't
that's true.
you can't assume that you're avoiding conflict by taking care of that early. You are probably increasing your chances of avoiding a conflict if that's your goal of selecting your entire slate in December, including a nominated person to the planning commission, but that might not be how it turns
Right,
out.
because, I mean, you know, if you had a larger board or whatever, but, you know, like to be the secretary is, you know, it's a time-consuming position, and it's not like, you know, and actually you do get paid. In our situation, the secretary does get paid because it is time-consuming to write up the minutes and everything. But you know, to do it all in one meeting, so nobody gets overburdened, because it's not like we're making big bucks off this or anything, and it can be time-consuming. That's the point.
So ultimately, if it's the will of the BZA to come to consensus to ask the board to entertain an ordinance amendment to 170-40.
Right, which I don't think it's not an unreasonable. I mean,
Put that in writing, and we'll see what the board comes to after they do public hearings on the matter.
Yeah. I mean, that, you know, I don't think it would be an incredibly controversial request. So. Okay, so let's just stick with what we have written here then, and then we will deal with that on the other end, which is not a part of our rules and procedures then. Okay, under the regular meetings, the obvious change in there is that we don't meet on the fourth Tuesday of each month. We meet on the fourth Wednesday, and I don't know how and that's been in there for a long time, but that's
Where does it say Tuesday?
the change there. Quorum stays the same. Conduct of business, Robert's Rules of Order is the same. Adjournments, same. Continuance, stay the same.
Where does it say Tuesday?
Yeah, well,
In the draft amendment I got,
I don't know. This is what your
signed
sign.
the revised May 2019. Now the one that,
May 22, 2019 is the revised and adopted version that's on Boarddocs, and it says Wednesday.
It says Wednesday.
oh, it does say Wednesday, okay, well then, this obviously this one I got when we had our meeting years on in May of 2019.
Maybe that error was fixed there.
And I never got another one, and so, okay, we're fine. That was easy.
Before COVID.
Okay, Article 4, orders of business. Yes, there's some questions here that I see. The agenda for each regular meeting is certainly established by, and let's see. Where is it? Yeah. Oh, no, okay. That's what mine's the. This copy I got then is way out of date, and I never got it up. I never had a thing. Anyways, yes, the chairman. Okay, was the thing that I had question on there. Let's go get more interesting as we go on. Okay, so I don't think there's anything other than that. Going to organization of the agenda under call to order. Basically, we put in the pledge prior to the establishing of the quorum and the adoption of the agenda. And all of I think all of the boards have done that. So. And let's see. Under quorum, 5-1, that's pretty much boilerplate. 5-2.
Are they talking about recusing someone would reduce the membership to less than the majority?
That was my question on that, and I don't know exactly how that gets handled, and the potential does exist, particularly with
The State Conflict of Interest Act explicitly states that if members recuse themselves, that doesn't eliminate your quorum. You're still able to act.
Well, that settles that.
If you say you have 3 people at a meeting, three people at a meeting, it's a quorum, and you're gonna hear a case, and one of them has a conflict related to that property, they can recuse themselves, subject to the Conflict of Interest Act, the other two can still act. Now, where that might call to question is if there's a variance or an appeal, when you need to have a majority of the full
Yeah,
body vote, but
That was my thinking is that, you know, if you have a quorum and suddenly you have three people, for whatever reason, recuse themselves,
you still have to move forward. The
Well,
person
yes.
deserves their day
and I was just, you know, so there is, you know, so legally or whatever, you can still move forward with two people, and unless in the variances or whatever where it requires three.
I imagine that that's still covered based on the way it's written in chapter 31, but that might be something you take a note and ask your attorney to look specifically at that
Okay, yeah.
oddball scenario.
Yeah, that's what I look at, is it's, you know, it's oddball, but doesn't mean it's not gonna happen, so. Okay, and 5.3. Okay, that's what you're just talking about.
That explains it right there.
The remaining members of the board shall have the authority to act. It would be interesting if it came down to one, but anyhow, yeah, I'll ask him, we can ask him about that. Okay, now general rules,
Okay, so I think we have a problem here.
general rules,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think 170, 128, this is not applicable, but all appeals and applications as provided for in this chapter shall be submitted in writing on forms prescribed by the responsible official. Which I'm assuming is the zoning administrator.
Right. And
and that's in
That's
controversy of what we have here.
170, 128.
Yeah, I mean, our general rules say that the forms are approved by the board in 6.1, unless that was changed also. I don't
that's
know.
forms for appeals, okay? There it is.
Well, that's what I'm wondering at.
And that's different than, if you were to look at.
170, 128.
Yeah, I just saw that. If you were to look at 55, which is applications for special use permits. Forms provided by the county. So there's some, I guess if you're gonna read both of those sections, I guess the official, whatever the wording in 28 is, could be interpreted to be the same as the county.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, the responsible official.
Second here. Okay, where are we here? Yeah, okay, just, this, I'm assuming it's the current one, because mine may not be, but anyways, on 6.1, general rules, applications for special use permits, variance, appeals shall be made on forms approved by the board.
Yeah, I think
Together,
that's
so
by the zoning.
that has to change, and that, no, they're not anymore, and that was, and it's also, here it's required by zoning ordinance 170-57 and 170-129, we're talking about 128,
Yeah,
so is there,
And there is a 129, and that has to do with every application required under the provision of this chapter shall be filed with the zoning administrator with no mention of the BZA secretary.
Right, that's what, so that's what I'm saying, so we've got,
We got two problems.
yeah, we've got,
And that's 17057.
fix this so it basically complies to the county ordinance.
Okay, and I don't even have a 57.
It's on the screen, submission requirements. Not germane if it's variance or appeal, but
Okay, that's the requirements on the form, but it doesn't talk about who it goes to.
that's in 17055. Application shall be filed with the zoning administrator on forms provided by the county. I would suggest you change 6.1 to change board to county.
Okay.
It aligns with this section. In 7055B.
And then take out secretary and/or secretary.
Yes.
Yeah.
What ultimately should happen, it should be filed with the zoning administrator who should transmit it to the secretary when it's complete.
Okay, so 170-57 has nothing to do with doing.
Well, it talks about the items that you need to have. I mean,
57.
I would be more general if I were you and just say article of the zoning ordinance. Required by the zoning ordinance, period. Everything. And then whether it's an appeal or a variance or a special use permit.
Yeah, that works.
Cover your ass statement.
Yeah.
Okay, and then,
Okay, so if I read this now. Applications for special use permits, variance, and appeals shall be made on forms approved by the county with all information required by the zoning ordinance and 170-129 and filed by the applicant with the zoning administrator and transmitted to the BZA secretary. Or should I leave that out?
Well, 17055 now.
I would transmit it to the BZA
Transmitted to the BZA.
because, quite honestly, it ends up being online anyways, so just transmit it to all the members at the same time so that they know what's going on.
Yeah, so what this says in 17055C is that the zoning administrator shall refer the application to the planning commission, and in addition to the agency or review bodies may be specified by a particular category, blah, blah, blah. So this should be referred to the planning commission and BZA or the board, yes, plus any other review agency.
Okay, and then go on, and then that sounds good. But then after filing preliminary review, the zoning administrator or the BZA secretary may require the applicant to supplement applicant maps and all that kind of stuff. That there again, that's putting the load on the secretary where it doesn't necessarily have to be, her responsibility or whatever. In that.
So you want, or BZA, take secretary out?
Or just have preliminary filing,
Preliminary review.
filing of preliminary review, the zoning administrator may, because this is having to do with the ensuring that all the documents are there.
Yeah, and I would say,
And quite honestly, we've had some issues with that.
Yeah.
We need to get cleared up. So somehow changing the wording, so,
I would just take secretary out and say, after filing a preliminary review, the zoning administrator or the BZA may require the applicant to supplement the application with such maps, plans, and drawings, etc.
right, and it's, let's see, how is this worded also? Supplement applications with such maps, plans, drawings, VDOT, help to permits or approvals if required. And that, I think the if required is, could be an issue also, because if they're the documents that are listed on the application, the way I read it is that those are required documents.
Yeah.
For everybody or whatever, so,
Yeah.
they are all required,
As required.
As
instead of-
or as, yes, okay, yes, change that to as. Okay.
Sorry.
No, great, thank you.
As the board rewrote this 17055E,
Yeah.
the applications for special use permit are not supposed to go anywhere until they're complete. So you can read that section on the screen.
Okay.
Right, yes. And actually just going farther in that sentence, and now they have, approvals as required, but then it says, and such other pertinent information as may be necessary, which is a very gray area. In that basically, the requirements on the application are, for the most part, everything we're required. I mean, if we have all that, there are,
Well, sometimes
You know,
you
if-
require people to have fire extinguishers and landlines and,
well,
I
that's,
mean, unless your proposal doesn't include anything that would broach, then, that would be a,
well, it's,
Case.
the question becomes, the definition of pertinent information.
well, we decide that. Isn't that how it works? We just say, oh,
Well,
we
that,
need more information.
Well, that can be an area that can get controversial, and if we start requiring things that are, really not pertinent. I mean, that's what I mean. For some reason, it gets very picky or whatever on an application, and it's not something that applies to other applications for the most part.
Well, that's why a fire extinguisher would be left to our discretion later on to decide.
Well, no, I mean, and that's an interesting example, but a
Just
fire
something-
extinguisher
Because
is
there's no
should
building
be,
involved.
Well,
There's
like,
no-
for instance, if on a church issue, up on the hill,
right,
they do, after preliminary review, we might have wanted to know how many cars go by, or how many
okay,
cars that,
okay,
I mean, they're just issues that come up that aren't within, that are pertinent, but may not be,
okay, how about if we word it this way then, because because that information is sort of in the maps, plans, drawings, VDOT, health areas, so other pertinent information that pertains to
Individual
the required
applications.
information. Because otherwise, it allows us, which we really don't want to do, to go out on tangents on certain things that we probably shouldn't be doing.
And we're done.
Oh, yes, we have, and like I said, that.
you wanna
that
say
keeps us on.
relevant, would that do it?
Say it again?
Relevant?
Well, my thinking is such other pertinent information that applies to the required information, and that, there's information that has been presented on the application that fulfills all of the requirements, but there are some other items that fit into that that we need information on, so that would become pertinent information. But it has to apply to the required information, that's all I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Okay,
We're saying such pertinent information as required, may be required by the BCA, not necessary, I mean, how are we?
Well, that's what I'm saying, just, and such other,
What about, how about just say, such, other necessary information for the BZA?
well, I don't have a problem with the pertinent information, because that is, it's sort of referring to, but referring the pertinent information to the required information. So it's additional, or it could change to additional, I wouldn't change it, to additional information.
Well, some of the things we need will apply to every case, every single case, others will only apply to one or the other, circumstances.
Well, if it applies to every case, then it should be in the required, it should be included in the required information, and perhaps there needs to be some definition work done on the application to define exactly what is being looked for in the different areas. I'm not trying to make it
Well, you
difficult.
really can't plan in advance every case that's gonna come up, so we really wanna be kind of general on this level, I would think.
Well, there is the,
There's some
I mean,
about
the-
buildings, some won't, the fire extinguisher and a landline are,
yeah, they don't apply to variance, obviously.
That's the point.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm saying, that to just make it, to apply the pertinent information to the existing categories that are being required. So it's not an addition, it's not really an addition, something else that's being, it's something under, it's on
Do you
under
want
maps or
how
under
about
plans or under drawings or whatever.
Supplemental?
Hmm?
How about supplemental?
Supplemental, that's a good word.
Good, oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Yeah, perfect. And then when the application is deemed to be complete as provided in ordinance section 170-129, the BZA secretary shall place all such material in a file duly identified by the name of the applicant or appellant and the nature and number of the case. And that requires the zoning administrator to transmit all this, the information to the secretary or whatever, and then she's got, there's two different files or whatever, and whether that information could just be required by the zoning administrator placed in the file. Because that's who it's coming from anyways. And basically, I have no idea, and I don't think the secretary actually affects any idea if the secretary position changes is, where are those files that the BZA secretary is maintaining?
They have to admit that did occur to me. Where are these files?
That's the point. I don't know if they exist. Like I said, they're the way it's worded here, but whether it's actually being done or has been done, and one would think that it should all just be in the zoning office in a file, which does to have separate files at different locations.
That's onerous to a secretary, I think, to actually keep the files, because the secretaries change and the zoning office is always there.
Well, I'm a little confused on what you said.
What I'm saying, if you kept the files, we're wondering what happened to where the files are. Supposedly they're being kept by the secretary according to this, but I would think that it would be more prudent to keep them in a place
Well,
where
it says here that
various
every,
secretaries wouldn't have to be passing the files on to the next
Yeah, yes,
secretary.
that's what exactly what I'm saying, is that would be the zoning office.
Right, exactly.
every
Agree with you 100%.
application required under the provisions of this chapter shall be filed with the zoning administrator.
Yeah, that's what I mean, so let's get rid of that requirement on the zoning secretary, and it just goes to the zoning office.
Right.
I think some of the confusion may be that when these were drafted, and Mr. Connick drafted them based on state code language, which assumes the secretary is going to do everything. But then the state code also says that the Board of Supervisors in adopting their ordinance can make reasonable rules on how you're going to do all this stuff. And so they've done that with the ordinance, which really, in that case, is enabled by the state to trump what the state says.
Right.
So it really needs to align with the ordinance as opposed to state code.
So we can
That's
take this
probably
out.
what you're doing now.
Yeah, that's what I said, you know, trying to apply the KISS principle. Okay, now we get to, I think we're fairly straight there. Now we're at 6.2, which is the legal representation.
And the language I have for that is if the applicant or appellant is a legal entity, corporation, limited liability company, partnership, trust, etc., for variance, appeals, or other quasi-judicial matters, it must be represented by counsel before the board.
That's the way it's written right now.
No,
No,
No, we don't.
that's not the way it's written.
I like that though.
quasi-judicial knowledge.
So run that.
So it's in other words, it's not for a special use permit.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, that's the change we need to make. And
Yeah.
I believe the state code requires it for appeals and variances.
Right, so
So
that's
we
why
just
I
want
put that
to,
in.
make it very clear in this thing that it's not required for special use permits, but for appeals and variances, it is.
Right.
So,
So if the applicant or appellant is a legal entity, corporation, limited liability company, partnership, trust, etc., for variances, appeals, or other quasi-judicial matters.
What else is
I don't know whatever.
yeah, what's
Is there
the, I
something
mean, what
else?
other matters would
there? I'm
we?
not aware of anything else.
Okay,
It's
it's just
something
put
next week.
variances or appeals.
Yeah, as I said, that's the only thing we deal with. We don't, I don't know
Or
what the
appeals,
quasi.
okay. We'll take that one out. It must be represented by counsel before the board. Then I guess we should say, any filing by or on behalf of a legal entity pertaining to variances or appeals?
Oh, I know, what actually we need to put in there that just makes it a little easier to understand is a reference to the state, the Virginia code on it, which is 16.1-8803.
That's 8803.
Which is under the ethics rules. So that's the basis for the requirement. So that will clear that matter up. Now, under appeals, where is that here? Yeah, there's the line where you get down to where it says the zoning administrator and the BZA secretary in accordance with 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia. And I went to 2.2-3711 and it has to do with closed meetings. And so I think it was a mistake as far as the code reference.
Definitely would be a 15.2 reference.
I think it might be
Yeah.
2.2-2311, maybe the proper.
Yeah, that's right, too,
reference.
yeah.
And basically, I think that's the one that has to do with the time requirements.
Assume it was 15.2.23.11 if it's talking about.
Yeah, that's what I think. too.
Yeah.
Appeal shall be taken within 30 days of a decision.
Yeah, and under in B there, where the BZA shall fix a reasonable time or whatever for 60 days, I believe that's been changed to 90 days.
I don't know why. Yeah, it should be 15.2.23.11, same as the other reference.
15 to 23.
One, yeah, same one that's just a sentence up. This one.
Yeah,
Is that their,
Yeah.
and does
Which it
that,
says appeal shall be taken within 30 days after the decision.
Yeah.
It's almost the last.
It'd be final and unappealable if unappealed within 30 days. That is what you're getting at right there.
okay, and do we want to take out the BZA secretary? Well, I guess you need notice, right? Yeah, we'll keep that.
well, I'm not, that reference there may be in the state code.
Yeah, I also think you need the notice, right?
Oh, yeah, particularly with appeals, yes. And then when we go down to C, I would just say same thing as far as code references when you get to the end of the first sentence where it says represented by counsel, put in 61.1-8803. Okay, and then under C, there also, where you get to the sentence that starts affected parties shall be given an equal amount of time. I think if we could change that to parties withstanding, in that affected parties, I'm not sure what the definition of that actually is, but there is a definition for standing parties, and I mean, affected parties, they may think they're affected, but
Mostly the people who are affected are the people who think they are, I suppose.
well, yes, I mean, like I said, where like I said, there's a definition for standing,
Yeah, right.
So,
But that is gonna eliminate a lot of people, isn't it? I mean, if you have legal standing, it means you have to be a budding property or you have to be across the street.
well, you have to, you know, it depends on the case, but at least you can look at it and apply something where affected parties, because of the lack of definition, it's hard to look at it and say what exactly constitutes an affected party.
I mean, we would try to be as broad as possible, I would think, to allow people to.
Well, and we would do the same thing with standing, and then, you know, I mean, if it's
I mean, legal standing is different.
Yeah,
from
it's
affected.
different.
I mean, we're talking legal
Yeah.
term, legal standing, that's why you want that, because it's a legal term, right? Because you can.
well,
define it.
it's a definable term.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that we need a definable term, we just want people who are, like, yeah, and you don't want, you know, people from Flint Hill coming down and complaining about Sperryville or something.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is,
Okay,
you know,
you
if it's a matter in Sperryville or whatever, and you're from Flint Hill, I understand you have an opinion on that or whatever, but you're not necessarily an affected party,
You're right.
or you don't have standing, so.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but standing is a legal term,
Yeah,
and I don't think people who are.
and it's actually referenced in, yes, appeals on zoning decisions a lot of times. It's like when we had the case on Greg Williams' property or whatever. I mean, you know, the people that we allowed to make comments or whatever that had to have standing, and they lived in that area. They didn't live in Sperryville or whatever, because you want the people that are directly affected. The people with standing are directly affected.
And what is the definition? I mean, it's a legal definition, right?
Of what, affected?
Standing.
Yeah,
I mean,
like if I pull up something, yes, but it has to do with, you know, and it varies because, like I said, it's still sort of a gray term, but, because I mean, if you're in certain situations, say on signs or certain things or whatever, where you drive by every day with your family, say, or with your children, then you could become considered, you know, to have standing,
oh, okay.
even though you don't
that's
live
it.
there.
Right, well, yeah. I mean, you know, them for children, that's a good, you know, or things, you know, whatever.
Okay. Let me see.
And you know, just thinking about it is as a board or whatever, it allows us to, yeah, we make the decision on what we consider for this particular case
Means
is having standing.
means a personal and substantial interest in a case such that the party has sustained or will sustain direct injury as a result of the governmental act. I'm not sure that being offended by a sign gives one a standing. Because I can't understand that as being personal or direct injury.
Well, and is that's the standing for, you know, I was going to say for certain legal matters or whatever, you know, standing is going to be weighed. You know, that's what I said. It's a term that has to be interpreted by the deciding body, I think.
Yeah, you have to.
So we're gonna
Only when
substitute one grade
Well, yeah, okay.
for another grade definition?
Well, I mean, only because the words, you know, like I said, there is a definition for standing. I'm not sure there is a definition for affected parties in these in legal matters or whatever.
Given that these matters can be appealed to the court, I would suggest you consult with your attorney on the best way to word
Yeah.
that section.
Okay.
In the ordinance, it says, public hearing of notice is required. Let's see, Owners of property affected by the question. Are they, I guess we could restrict it to that, but I think referring it to the.
Yeah, let's refer that and see what we think is gonna be the best way to go. Okay, so I think that takes care of 6.3. There is no 6.4.
Well, there's two 6.5, so.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. We had that problem. I forgot about that one. Yes, actually, there is a 6.4, and actually, I don't know exactly what to do about that because it may become a moot point here.
Or we just have,
Don't make it smaller, make it bigger.
Well, no. What I'm saying is that we.
No, I was talking to him.
Oh, I see. You know, we may not be dealing with special use permits in the future. So, other than the one thing, let's see, what I have here. We shall probably yeah, there was a change there with the zoning administrator on forms approved by the board again, which is not correct. We shall promptly transmit the application and accompanying that, blah, 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 to the secretary of the BZA. We shall in turn place the matter on the board's docket for hearing. The zoning administrator or secretary shall also transmit a copy of the application to the planning commission. That's not true anymore. The zoning administrator does that.
do we change this to conform with what we're doing, or do we change our behavior to conform to this?
No. I mean, you know, we've been making this change throughout the document, so the applicant, you know, all that stuff is transmitted to the BZA, not the secretary of the BZA, and yeah, and then continue that, and then yes, we still retain the decision on when it gets placed on the docket for a public hearing, as opposed to what they're doing now with the planning commission, where when it goes to planning commission, it goes to a public hearing.
No.
Or, I mean, we could, maybe we should change that, because that makes for fewer meetings, and as long as all the information, you know, and you know, as long as all the information's there that's required, which it should be, and that doesn't really need to be a board decision. That can be the secretary or the chairman looks at it and goes, yeah, everything's there, and so it goes immediately to public hearing. That speeds up the process, which is what, you know, is everybody's intent anyways.
Yeah. So we would just be looking at whatever the planning commission did, or?
Well, we would get the recommendation from the planning commission. It would still allow us to, I mean, we would have the application, we could do our own personal homework or whatever.
Due diligence.
And, you know, and even if it goes to public hearing and a problem surfaces or whatever, we have the option to continue the hearing. But there is, you know, if everything's in order or whatever,
It says
it goes through
After
approval.
within 60 days of receipt of a completed application for special use, after public notice is required by the Code of Virginia, the BZA shall hold a public hearing. Is that foreseen?
Yeah, and we've run into that at that time frame before, that we had some questions or whatever, and we had the person come back in, and, you know, there was discussions back and forth or whatever, and no, let's get it to the public hearing, and if like I said, if a problem pops up, we've got an option to continue it and get the necessary information or whatever, and then make the decision at the next meeting, and we're still within the time frame.
I'm just trying to figure out if
But like I
we're
said,
required to.
it may become a moot point, and I'm not sure how the changes are made or whatever, what the policy would be, if everything went to the Board of Supervisors, whether they, might want to do exactly the same thing, is that it goes to them as a public hearing, and let's talk about it and get it over.
I'm just trying to figure out if there's a required hearing in the ordinance.
The required hearing, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the BZA has to.
Yeah, we have to have a public hearing.
Yeah.
But how we handle that,
Yeah, I would, well, it's nice to have very detailed rules of procedure, and you would like to be able to read them independent from the ordinance. I don't think you need to repeat everything in the ordinance in the rules of procedure, and more referral, because a lot of this portion for special use permits can just refer back to 170-55, which deals with the application process for special use permits, and perhaps the public hearing section, but I think you have a whole other section on that in your rule of procedure. At the end of the day, you need to follow the ordinance and then any other special rules you want to put on top of that.
yeah,
So
and
what are the
that's
special
what I was
rules?
looking at, was basically, in our rules and procedures requiring us to have, we'll have a public hearing when, because it's already been to the planning commission, and issues have been raised or whatever, and that allows, BZA members to, particularly now, you can watch the planning commission hearing online and be aware of all those situations, and if you've got questions, you can do your homework in whatever way you want to do it, and then when it comes to you, it's going to the public hearing again, and you sort of required your members to do their homework in advance, but like I said, if something comes up, then you can continue the public hearing.
Still in the prime time frame.
Right, so the timing that I'm aware of is from the time the application lands on your desk from after the planning commission, you've got 90 days. That's when it's first on your agenda, you've got 90 days, and that's 170-55F.
Now, okay,
And
Well,
that's
then I'm
special
gonna-
use.
Not to render your decision, you've got 90 days. That's 170-55F, which is on the screen. BZA board shall render a
now is
decision.
that after the planning commission though?
Yeah.
Or I thought that was when.
No longer than 90 or 120 days, which 120 is the board, following the first meeting in which the application was on the agenda. That's the agenda for the BZA or board. So when it's on the agenda of the BZA, you've got 90 days.
Okay.
So you don't necessarily have to have a public hearing right away. Could, but you have 90 days. So
Right.
do you want to use your 90 days up before the public hearing, after the public hearing, a little bit of both? That's where you can, if you want to specify in the rules how you're going to do it every time, you could do that.
Okay, 'cause I'll admit I was confused on that, and I thought there was certain days requirements in here that was when, from the time it went to the zoning administrator, that the permit, because it goes through the planning commission first.
Right, so now it goes to the zoning administrator, it's not deemed on file and complete. It's not deemed on file until it's complete. And if that in fact happens more than 16 days before the planning commission meeting, it will be placed on the planning commission agenda for public hearing.
Right.
Because those 16 days provide the 2 weeks notice in the newspaper that are required.
But then,
They can make a recommendation at that night of the public hearing, or they might, if it's something that is big, want more information from the applicant, even after a complete application, want more time, might hold it over to the next meeting. At some point in time, they're gonna be done and refer it on to you, at which time your next meeting would land on your agenda.
right, that's my confusion, is that the clock starts ticking again after it leaves the planning commission. The clock starts ticking again on a different time frame. I was
Here.
my understanding, like I said, so I was confused, and I thought it was, because that can stretch it out forever.
Well, not
But,
ever. The planning commission technically could stretch it out a very long time. Once it's on your agenda, 90 days.
Okay.
Seems pretty clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So we just,
And 120 for exceptions, right? Is that what that
and
means?
that's what, yeah,
So, first of all, are we talking about 6-4?
well, yes, which
Which doesn't exist.
Yeah, okay, so, and then, is it, what you wanna do is, the part that says, is that it shall be made by the zoning administrator, who shall promptly transmit the application, accompanying map plans, etc., to Secretary of the BZA, who shall in turn place the matter on the board's docket for hearing.
And that's not gonna happen until the planning commission finishes their action with it
right,
pursuant to 17055, so.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, you just need to say that you're gonna handle things in accordance with 17055, and then layer on top of that anything you want.
Yeah.
It already requires public hearing in accordance with 2204 and all those other things.
okay. Yeah.
Okay, so the rewrite of,
So we can, we may not, other than, in that area, we may not need to do anything, then just leave it the way it is, and if that's the state code on it or
And
whatever.
section 64 should probably say something like,
yeah, it's wrong,
upon referral from the planning
Yeah.
commission,
that's right.
Right,
in accordance with 17055F, the BZA will render a decision within 90 days.
And then you might talk about
B, you can still reference the public hearing, but that's in 17055 already.
all the process of how this happens and the advertisements.
right.
Okay,
So
so
we straight on that
upon
side?
referral from the planning commission, And pursuant to 170-55 of the Rappahannock ordinance, the BZA shall hold a public hearing within 60 days.
Well, hold the public hearing and render a decision within 90 days. And how you fit those things into that 90-day period is up to you based on a case-by-case scenario.
Yeah, works.
Okay. Within 60 days, and render a decision within 90 days. Okay.
Okay. So that takes care of 6.4. Then we go to 6.5, which is very similar. And where it says such application shall be made to the zoning administrator on forms approved by the board, that comes out.
You probably want to include reference here, just like you did in 6.3 appeals. There was reference in the middle about who could file it. Even though you have 6.2 that talks about who's allowed to file it, there was a reference in 6.3 somewhere in here. The legal entity and all that, and then in 6.5, you might also want to have some cross-reference back to 6.2.
Oh, okay.
Somebody might just open this up and go right to 6.5 and never look at 6.2.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
right.
Okay.
Okay, and then when you get down to the administrator shall promptly transmit the application and accompanying maps, plans, and it's got an and/or other documents or and/or other information to the secretary of the BZA. I think it should be basically the application and required documents. Because that's the reference we sort of been using.
Because they take out a company.
And not to the secretary, but just to the BZA. And then under A and D there, I think that's the same thing we've been doing, is it's basically within 90 days, we've got to have the public hearing and render a decision. Where it states here that you got to have the public, unless that's, well, it depends on how the code reads now. Within 60 days, you have to have the public notice and public hearing, and then within 30 days after that, you have to make the
Next
decision.
meeting, basically.
What?
Basically, it's the next meeting.
Well,
You have to
it's,
render
you
the
know,
decision by the next meeting.
Yeah, but the, you know, the days, I mean, and we've had that at times in the agenda.
Well, it ends up being
Certain times you end up
31
having to call a
days,
special
right?
meeting because of
Yeah,
the requirement.
Can we change that to 31
But
or
I,
something?
and I, like I said, I don't know, I don't have 2204 in front of me in regards to, we've been talking 90 days on some of this. For the
2204
whole,
doesn't
the
cover
entire
it.
process.
2204 is just for the advertising of the public hearing. That would be in a
Oh,
different
okay.
section.
So we basically, then we're still in that 90-day timeframe, right?
Yeah.
So let's just make
Well,
it,
the previous 90-day timeframe we talked about is special use permits only.
right.
That
This is
doesn't
very-
apply to variances.
All right, so this doesn't have anything to do with 90 days. I think it'd be really nice if we could change that 30 to 31, and we wouldn't have to change, we wouldn't have to schedule special meetings where we have.
No, it's a
long
state, but that's, I mean, it's a code requirement though, I think. State
Oh,
code
it is?
requirement. The days are, so we can't make that change.
month.
So there is a Rappahannock County Code section 136.
136.
Variances.
On variances.
The very last thing. The BZA shall render a decision on the request for variance within 90 days after receipt of a complete application. No fees. That's in the town. Grant the decision not rendered within the 90-day period. That's what we denied.
Just let it die.
Well, it would be denied and they would have appealability to the circuit court.
Okay, where are you in that?
That was the last section of 17036, is where it has the 90 days. I was just going up to see if I could find where it might describe.
Oh, here we go,
Public
yeah,
hearing.
sure. Okay.
So it doesn't appear to prescribe when you hold your public hearing. The thought may have been when the rules were previously constructed, that if you force yourself to have the public hearing within 60 days, you still have 30 days left.
Right,
Yeah,
And it was just internal requirement on yourself
Yeah.
to make sure you meet that 90 days.
but it also, you know, it could, for some reason, become a burden at some point in time, or whatever, and, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know,
could also just say.
Technically, you could have, you could have your public hearing on the 89th day and make a decision, and you've met the requirement, and life goes on, so.
So you could just say you're going to process applications for variance in accordance with the Rappahannock County Code Section 170, 136.
yeah.
Sounds nice and simple.
Okay?
Okay, great.
Okay, down to Article 7, legal notice of hearings, when the secretary has determined that the filing together is fine, so make that, change that to the, that the zoning administrator does that.
But this is an important point,
Okay.
and the zoning administrator should know whether she's authorized to advertise for public hearing
in absence of direction by the BZA or only after direction by the BZA? So must a matter come to you and you say, I authorize you to advertise this for public hearing?
Okay, good point. So basically, we change
Or you prescribe to say, hey, if the zoning administrator says it's complete, advertise it, and we'll sort out whatever's we think is not complete after we hear from the public. So, I mean, it's kind of two ways to go about it, but it should be clear so there's no confusion
Absolutely.
when that ad goes in the paper, the notice goes in the paper.
So what are we?
So we want to put when the zoning administrator has determined that the filing together with all required.
Or like I said, we can word it such that the BZA will authorize the zoning administrator to, do the required filing or whatever.
Which means
It shouldn't
for
go in a minute.
every special use permit variance appeal, you're at least gonna see it one time before it goes to public hearing. And there's nothing wrong with that, that would just basically be what it means. You see it, then you say,
Yeah, and
advertise for a public hearing at the next meeting.
I mean, it's and the only reason that I can see that there's the problem is that if for some reason all the required documents aren't there, or whatever. Although we can still, if that question comes up, you can still, if the public hearing is scheduled, you can still make that requirement and the zoning administrator to notify the applicant, and the applicant will provide, realize that they have to have that at the public hearing. So it would speed things along, I think, to just allow the zoning administrator to have that option.
Right.
Right. So then the wording would be, when the zoning administrator has determined that the filing together with all required site plans, et cetera, have been duly filed. Each application reviewed,
You just changed from secretary to BZA, or not BZA, the zoning administrator.
which is functionally the way it's been
I
working.
was going to say, that's pretty much the way it's been happening anyway, so. And then on 7.2, that's all just the ex parte or, the legal mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, that's all required. Adjacent landowners and all that.
Okay, let's see now, on conduct, I don't see anything other than we get down to I.
So just 7.3, the second paragraph there.
What?
I don't know that the application form repeats that ex parte information. It's probably not a bad idea. You can keep that in your rules. I just don't know if that's in there right now.
Now, as I understand it, though it's never happened, there are some issues in which we can be lobbied.
Oh, well, you definitely can for a special use permit.
Yeah,
For special use, right? That's all.
but for appeals and
It's
variances,
basically a legal case. So you can't go have information on one side that the other side isn't printing to. So it's a full exchange of information.
So you think we can put that in the application for
for appeal of variance, where it applies that there should be some sort of statement on ex parte communications, and I can't recall if it's there or not, so I can probably pull it up.
Yeah, and actually, and it doesn't have anything to do with the ex parte, but particularly the variances and appeals, the information about attorney representation should be required on that form also.
Oh, yeah.
It may be
If
already,
it's
I'm
a
not
legal
sure,
entity,
but that's
right.
something, because that can be confusing and put people in a bad situation.
So if the applicant is acting on behalf of a group person by local law, that's on there. But the ex parte is not on
The last one.
there. It's
In
in
the
the, it's in the appeals, not the variance.
Yeah.
So we can clean that up. And if you weren't aware, the forms are on the county website.
Okay, so where are we?
Here, I'm on the floor. Hearings. We're on now 7-4.
Okay, good. So go down to I, and there again, it's the affected parties are listed again, and there should be a reference in there that people that are speaking need to identify themselves by name and address.
It's in there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in the beginning.
In defense of the parties withstanding, particularly in that situation where you're granting equal time, and that I think it is important there, and that in those situations, like I said, if it has something to do with Flint Hill, you don't want to have to grant equal time to somebody who lives in Sperryville, because
I think I've lost, is it,
on I.
so
The
DI or?
It's right bottom,
Okay.
bottom of the page,
Got it.
or bottom of my page. Where's the color?
I don't have it. I don't have that.
Is it, what's on the screen?
That's D.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Oh, you know, that's entirely different than what I've got here.
Before you get to I or D, A right now says that all meetings shall be videotaped or recorded, which is only happening tonight by Rap News. If practicable, such video or electronic recording shall be a public record as defined in 3701. I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea. You might want to ask your legal counsel. It's being recorded. Is the Rap News recording a legal public record? I don't think so. I would strongly recommend that
Oh,
your
yeah, let's-
legal public record be your minutes,
Yeah, I agree.
not a recording.
I mean, it would take action by the board of supervisors, I think, to make
Well, I think
that, you know,
you
and
could
I don't think.
probably
Judge.
define your minutes as your official
Yeah, that's
minutes
it,
as
that's
the
what
audio,
I
which if it
think
exists,
that's
kind of
right.
says it's right there. but-
Oh, okay, well, that's
In
true.
fact,
I don't
it's
think you wanna
actually,
do
the
that.
public's not paying for, I mean, it's courtesy of the Rap News.
Oh, I'm all for it, I
Okay,
just, you know, I just wanna make sure we're.
But preservation of that record and everything else is challenging. Preservation of the minutes in the minute book is different, but
Yeah, that's a really
you're
good.
gonna go find the recording from some meeting
Well,
10 years ago? Where is it? Who's storing it? I don't
And
think that.
if YouTube dies, it's gone.
Well, you're not even the custodian, so. Not to say that the video or audio might not be valuable in a court case or something, but it doesn't necessarily, isn't your public record.
So you just take out the first part of that sentence and say minutes? Should be a public record?
I think that that's, it's
Take out
understood
video.
that it's all right. I don't think we need it at all.
Probably not. The FOIA basically allows, the Records Retention Act allows you to destroy a recording as soon as after it's used to develop the next set of documents, right? So if you have a recording and then you create minutes from it, then the minutes become the record and then the recording doesn't have to be preserved forever. I don't know what this section was trying to get at,
But so we wanna strike video.
I think we want to strike the whole thing.
Oh,
I mean, I think you should aspire to have your meetings recorded so that the minutes can be accurately prepared.
Right.
But I don't know that you want to say that that video or audio is going to be a public record forever. I mean,
So
Right.
just take out that second sentence?
I think so.
Yeah, and then move on.
Yeah, we could. That's what we usually use.
So we say or transcriptions or minutes or
Yeah,
something,
somewhere
which would be
else.
transcriptions.
I think we're just taking that sentence out. Let's-
The whole
let's-
thing out?
Yeah, the whole sentence.
I think there might be a section on minutes somewhere in
There is somewhere, I just trying to.
Yeah, there's some place in here, there's
You
a
gotta file
reference
it right.
to
It's at the end, at
transcriptions.
the end.
Okay, yes, once again, this, let's run this through the shredder when I get home, because, so we are good in 6. 7 is basically all,
So you're reaffirming you are going to follow Robert's Rules of Order. Someone ought to know what that means.
maybe have a reference or something.
I have a great little cheat sheet if everybody
Yeah.
wants a copy of this.
Yeah, I love it.
Because if
Yeah.
not, you'll end up having an
Next
applicant
time.
challenging your process because you didn't follow Robert's Rules of Order and you don't even know what it is.
I don't think we follow them very closely.
Probably
do
not.
we?
Oh,
Well, it's Robert's Rules as modified by this.
Right.
Yeah,
If you're gonna state that you're gonna do it in here,
yeah, basically when it's not in our rules, then we
What about if we
refer
take
to
out
whatever
Robert's
is appropriate in Roberts.
What if we say BZA shall conduct its deliberations in accordance with these rules of procedure?
Yeah, but what was it? Kind of minutes, right? Robert's rules.
And then it goes on to say, motions must be made and seconded, discussion follows in the seconded motion, members may, prior to vote, withdraw their motion.
Yeah, it has a lot of it.
Right,
so the Board of Supervisors specifically did not reference Robert's Rules.
Yeah,
And they
okay.
prescribed to the process that they want to use because it's just too much to try to
Mm-hmm.
figure out. Somebody can use it as a tool or a weapon if they really knew what they were doing. Not to say that it'll ever happen. Just be aware that if it says it in here, you ought to know what it means.
So what do you think about saying BZA shall conduct its deliberations in accordance with these rules? And then we have the rules. These rules of procedure?
Well, as long as we're, these rules are gonna basically deal with all the variable scenarios that may pop up, where that's where Robert's on weird things, it's like, motions or, motions to table and all those kinds of things that are part of Robert's, that, it's kind of boilerplate stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Robert's rules is really long, I mean, it's a major book.
It
It's a
even
huge book.
allows,
I mean, I've got,
it even allows in the case of, people who are giving the meeting a hard time for us to call the authorities and have them removed, which our guidelines don't do.
Well, these rules say a lot of things that you have or haven't done in the past.
Yeah, true that.
yeah,
Yeah, I think if we just keep it simple and try to abide by what we have here,
Right.
we'll be doing ourselves a favor.
okay, works for me.
I mean, we could refer to Robert's rules without saying we have to follow
Oh yeah, you can copy the best parts of it.
them. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
and we could get the cheat sheet and see what we can.
Well, I don't have my book with me. It's not in here. It's in my, it's on the shelf someplace. I have them. But there is a sort of condensed, basic Robert's Rules of Order.
Are we ready to
There's
move
a
on?
lot, there's a lot of new Robert's Rules of Order, so we should probably pick an edition or something.
We haven't even gotten to the report yet.
No, but I'm gonna, and I.
Okay, yes, it's in. So I think that basically puts us,
Put these down.
oh, okay, yeah, the only other thing, and let me see if it's on this one. So that's under Article 8. Under- Oh, okay, how about 8.7? Within 30 days after the hearing, the secretary shall notify the parties of interest and the zoning administrator of the decision. What? 8.7? communication with the applicants normally has gone through the zoning administrator. If in fact they work here or whatever, she would, she just notifies them. So,
So you would take, landscape secretary out?
yeah. And as far as the zoning administrator knowing about the decisions, normally she's at the meeting, so it's not like we have to notify her about anything.
Right.
I don't know if 8.4, state code doesn't require 3 affirmative votes for an SUP. And I don't recall that it's anywhere in the ordinance, but it might be.
Yeah, that's true, it's required on variances, and I think it's required on variances and appeals.
Appeals.
Right.
So if you have a quorum,
Yeah, it could be
it's smaller than all of them, it still
Could be a
takes 3
2-1
votes.
vote. And that's,
But I don't, the state code doesn't require, I just, I don't know if it's only 52, but I don't know where that is. Fifty-two is for general standards,
General
I
standard.
don't think it's in there.
Okay, what about 8.6 then also?
Other matters.
On findings? Because that would apply the same thing, if it's a special
Yeah,
use permit.
well, that and the process above that findings, but I don't,
So at least 2 affirmative votes? A majority, how about that? Do we want to substitute a majority?
yeah, you can,
Let's see, how can you, I mean, is that actually required, because I think it's required elsewhere that we have to, deal with findings during the process of, making a decision. So, does that need to be in there at all?
that was referenced in 6.5, I think.
Yeah, on that one, let's check with,
170-40.
our attorney on that, because there's a question on the interpretation on how we deal with findings. In that, some places it says as long as it's, the findings are discussed as part of the deliberation, that satisfies the code, and you don't necessarily have to do what we do at times when we go through and, each one of them and make, vote on it or take a look at it or whatever, and that if those questions are all raised during the discussion, then that meets the law. And so then you get an answer on, an answer on that, which we can put in here, which would deal with how we deal with findings.
Yeah, it looks like 170-40E
Two.
2 says it's not very eloquent. But it just say you need affirmative vote of at least 3 members to reverse any order, requirement, decision, or determination by administrative officer on appeal, or decide in favor of an applicant on any matter upon which it is required to pass under this 170, or affect any variance therefrom. So that's pretty much everything you can do.
Oh, there's one.
So the code regime does not require for
What section is that?
140.
170-140.
Does cite the code.
Yeah, but if you go to look at that code, it will tell you have to do it for administrative actions. So, I mean, your rules are written consistent with that section.
Okay.
I don't remember how you changed 6.5, but this is the one where it says you need to, if B is still in 6.5, 6.4, board shall be required to make all the findings required by 170-52 by majority vote before entertaining a motion to approve or disapprove the special permit. That is in conflict with section you were just talking about, which at least 3 affirmative votes are required. So majority vote might not be 3 in some quorums.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you've got a conflict, but I don't remember what you kept in 6.4. That was the first 6.5B before, which is 6.4B, had that. So either that section needs to change or that section needs to change.
Okay, got that one lost here. So,
So the 6 up here where it talks about process, we had the first 6.5 for special use permit applications.
yeah,
B talks about procedures and conditions granting special use permits. And then it says the last sentence, the board shall be required to make all of the findings required in sections 170-52, general standards, by majority vote before entertaining a motion to approve or disapprove.
Right.
That says majority vote.
And
Yeah.
that could be 2 to 1.
That could be 2 to
Yeah.
1. Yet that the later section, 8 something,
Yeah, that's 8
it says you need to have 3, which I think is consistent with the local ordinance. Why, whatever board of supervisors said that, but that's what.
So change this.
So if there is still this section B remaining in 6-4, it needs to say not a majority vote, probably just say sections 170-52 in accordance with that other section. Right? In accordance with section 8-6.
No, okay, go in that direction. Or, because that sort of goes against, the majority vote on a special use permit or whatever, and then if you require, that's, 3 votes on the findings. If you can't get through the findings, you can't vote on the permit.
No.
Can we, you're saying that one part is written in our local code then?
The ordinance.
So
Ordinance says that you need to have 3 people for anything in chapter 170. That your determination you're making for anything in chapter 170. So I don't know why they wrote that, but that's what
Well,
it says.
basically we can also request that that there be a change in the ordinance.
Sure.
That would be, that would be the change, I think, that
Yeah.
would solve the problem, because it's,
Yeah.
it makes, if you only got 3 board members at a meeting, it makes decision making very difficult. And which is not fair for the applicant.
Right.
What was the number of the ordinance, I'm sorry?
It's 6-4 and 8-6. Somehow they need to.
Oh, no, right, but I mean.
Oh,
County ordinance.
County ordinance.
I think it was this one. It's
Yeah, that's that 170-140.
140E.
Yeah, 170.
2.
As a member of the planning commission, you can transmit those things over the process. That would be perfect.
How many more sections do we have to go?
Okay.
Okay, so I think we're at the end, aren't we?
Yeah. No, wait a minute, we do have this thing, any BZA member, what did we decide? Who wishes to resign shall send a letter with a date of resignation to the court.
Oh, I was looking at that, and that's an ordinance change also. And I'll, I thought I brought that with me, but basically that. No, I thought about it. Apparently, okay, I'll get that to you. And I've got, basically, I just stolen it from Hanover County or whatever. It's just
Okay, great.
one sentence thing that talks about reservations, and it's very simple.
So are you changing 9-1?
9.
Shall be kept by the zoning
Administrator?
Yeah, just change that to zoning administrator. That's time, all records, portion of records, rule, amended, suspension, we talked about that. And, well, 10.3, that, did we talk actually specifically about 10.3 or was that elsewhere?
That's in there twice. It's in here before about meetings, I think. It's conduct of meetings and public hearings, you follow Robert's rules. But then you even get broader, say any rules or procedure not specified in these rules are governed by Robert's rules. I don't even know what that means.
It's not a covered grass.
Right, it is, but.
Better know what
Could
the
we-
rule says.
Could we change shall to may? Maybe.
Well, 10.3 loses a lot of luster when 10.2 says you can ignore it just by taking a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you're really called to the carpet,
So let's take 10.3.
just take a vote.
Okay.
okay, so that's it?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a quick review.
Oh, okay.
Just because think we need to pay attention. And the Berkeley report, there was a combined meeting of the
Right.
planning commission and board of supervisors and
And
the.
the Berkeley, just so folks know, I mean, that is on Boarddocs, the whole report that you can
And,
just look at. Yeah.
It's worth looking at. And I think the consensus was, okay, so the Berkeley report made a number of recommendations. Among them, the following: the county may also consider eliminating the legislative role of Board of Zoning Appeals in favor of a single special use permitting process, which would mean that it would just go from the planning, special use
Right.
would go from the planning commission to the board of supervisors as opposed to the BZA. Some of the burden of the hearing would be eliminated by increasing the by right uses that we currently have, and increasing the standards that are required. Other,
Yeah, and that's interesting, and I stand corrected, because I have said at times that we don't legislate, which actually is true, but according to the state Supreme Court, the actions that we take
yeah,
in granting a special use permit is legislative in nature, and that's the difference, so.
okay, so among the recommendations that the Berkeley group made were amending the zoning ordinance comprehensively to ensure compliance with the Code of Virginia. That everybody felt was a really good idea. Enhance clarity and usability and reflect best practices included in this evaluation. I think in the end, what was decided was that Mr. Goff and Mr. Curry would take a stab at making the zoning ordinance increase the clarity and usability and revamp the tables for uses and try to update some of the definitions, which is the other thing. I think the Berkeley group will go through it to ensure compliance with the code.
Yeah, I think generally as generally discussed, it would not finalize any scope at this point in time, is that the Berkeley group would be a resource for additional staff capacity to do all these things, or bring options to the board and planning commission to consider, and then engage public to consider. Whereas obviously we have limited staff, so they would be an additional resource to chew through tasks.
And there was, I think, reluctance on many people's part just to hand the thing over to the Berkeley group, because their model is for counties that want economic development, which we're not necessarily in that category. And so we felt that staff was a little more attuned to the county than the Berkeley group might be. So that's my summary.
Yes, I was going to say, the only question I would look at is the time frame on it, and that we don't want it to be like a comprehensive plan, and that this gets goes on forever, and or just section it out maybe, and
They decide on the procedure.
I mean, we've gone.
I was there for most of it.
Yeah. I wouldn't say there was a procedure there.
Yeah, not entirely. There was, discussion and debate about trying to section it out, but if you do that, it's so interconnected
Yeah.
that it's very difficult to do that. So, the cleaning up the process and things like that are not changing who can do what where. There's a lot of thought that, that can really happen in moving things around in the ordinance to make it more readable. When it comes time to who can do what where, that's where it gets really more necessary of public input and that process, and how is that process gonna happen? There's not a lot of clarity there yet, but.
Yeah, because there's a lot, I mean, there's a lot of boilerplate stuff in there that's just gotta be, I mean, it's the state code, and just updating or whatever, and get that in there, at least even, so it's just there, and then start tweaking or whatever, but.
The other major thing I would say is there was discussion about, the Berkeley group suggested that they recommended to combine the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance into one comprehensive chapter. And there was discussion during the meeting about whether that would be a good idea or a bad idea. I opined I did think it would be a good idea and it might have unintended consequences, one of which being this body handles appeals of zoning matters and the board of supervisors handles appeals of subdivision matters, and that just seems to get very confusing once we combine it. But they have to be able to be read very carefully together.
Yeah, that's the problem that I think everybody runs into, is that you can't just look at the zoning ordinance, and you gotta go to the subdivision ordinance and combine it, and it gets, and even for people that are familiar with the document, it's difficult, but for the general public, it's just, they have no way of understanding it, and somehow work that out, so it's clear.
So there's gonna be a work session on Monday at 6 o'clock. Hopefully we'll do this.
Okay, great report. The hour is late. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
And I second it.
You were the second an hour ago.
I wouldn't.
All in favor? Aye. We're out.